Hi, I'm Alan Watt at cuttingthroughthematrix.com and .net and a few others which you'll see on the site. Today is February the 23rd, 2007. To finish off this week, I was thinking to talk about an event which happened in the 20th century, which was almost lost in the massive upheavals going around the world at the time, across Europe especially. And that was the famine in the Ukraine. The Ukrainian people had an incredibly hard time being whacked first by the communist system, the Soviet system, and eventually became a battlefield when the Soviets moved in World War II, while the Nazis were also moving in World War II, and the people who lived primarily in rural areas were being butchered by both sides. Horrible events occurred there, which have been glossed over, as we tend to do in this wonderful world of ours, where we deny the nasty stuff and it eventually gets swept under the carpet of time. We are so far removed in the so-called civilized countries from the horrors of war that they're now not even real to most people. People today can't tell the difference between fiction and reality. We've seen so many people blown up in movies, very realistic movies, that we can't tell the difference anymore. It means nothing. And that's why horror can be repeated. It's easier to do it on an unsuspecting, civilized public who go into a complete state of shock when it breaks out. The Ukraine had vast farmlands with small peasant owners who had lived there for generation upon generation, built their own houses, very self-sufficient and independent people, rich culture. But to the Darwinists and anthropologists that made up the Nazi and Soviet systems, these people were classed really as a stagnant population. They were not progressive. And if you're not progressive, they come down with a big stick on you to teach you a lesson or eliminate you. That's part of the Darwin theory. Those who can't adapt into this new system that's supposed to naturally evolve have to be eliminated and can't go forward into the new, an old Hindu philosophy really, since that's what Darwinism is based on, and all Freemasonry is too. This article comes from the mossnews.com from, I guess, Moscow. Created in the 27th of the 11th, 2006. This is what it says. Ukraine marks the 73rd anniversary of Soviet-era famine that claimed 10 million lives. When people ask me about monuments or social days towards holocausts, I've said over and over, I wish every country would put up memorials to government-created holocausts to their own peoples, because they're all over the world. This is what it says. Holding flickering candles and standing in perfect stillness, thousands of Ukrainians gathered on a fog-shrouded square to mourn 10 million compatriots who died of starvation during a man-made Soviet-era famine 73 years ago, the Associated Press reports. During the height of the 1932 to 1933 famine, known here as Holodomor, or death by hunger, 25,000 people died every day, devastating entire villages. Cases of cannibalism were widespread as desperation deepened. Those who resisted were shot or sent off to Siberia. I do not ask, I demand that the Ukrainian parliament recognize Holodomor as genocide, President Viktor Yushchenko told the crowd gathered on Kiev's Myhailovska Square on Saturday, in a short address followed by a minute of silence and the tolling of bells. Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin provoked the famine in a campaign to force peasants to give up their private farms and join collectives. This collective stuff really gets to me, you know. We're all one. We all have to be one. Our new communitarianism, which has been propagated in the West, the same stuff. We're all a big community. And it's not a recent phenomena. This has been going on since the Soviet system. This whole idea towards the collective, the hive. Authorities collectivized agriculture throughout the Soviet Union, but farmers in Ukraine, known as the breadbasket of the USSR, fiercely resisted and bore the brunt of the man-made disaster. Moscow has warned Kiev against using the term genocide, arguing that the issue should not be politicized, and some Ukrainian lawmakers agreed, proposing that it be termed, a tragedy instead. It was a tragedy. Yes. These are legalisms at work again to try and take the nastiness out of what actually happened. It was just a tragedy. That real people just like you and I and Mum and Dad and Granny and Grandpa, were starved to death and killed and shot. Russia argues that the orchestrated famine did not specifically target Ukrainians and also affected others, including Russians and Kazakhs. But historians say that the overwhelming majority of victims were Ukrainians, and the famine coincided with Stalin's effort to quash growing Ukrainian nationalism. I hope people realize how Sovietization and the Western capitalist system are one and the same thing, since their goal is exactly the same. To end nationalism was the cry of the Soviets by creating a world empire of collectivization, specialization, bureaucracies, and no independent planning of your own life. It'd all be planned for you by experts, and that just happened to be the same thing in the West. Yushchenko appealed to Russia to stand by our side and recognize the mass starvation as genocide. With this high example, demonstrate the human empathy that is inherent to the Russian people, he said. How can it be called anything but genocide, said Katerina Kryvenko, 78, who recalled crying at the feet of Soviet officials as they ransacked her family's village home, carting off what little food her family had managed to hide under floorboards. Authorities took everything, and Kryvenko's father and 3 brothers and sisters died. During the Soviet era, the mass starvation was a closely guarded state secret, but information trickled out over the years. 10 nations, including the United States, have recognized the famine as an act of genocide, defined as a deliberate and systematic destruction of a racial, political, or cultural group. Genocide is a crime under international law, but don't hold your breath, they won't take this any further. Ukraine's parliament speaker Alexander Moroz said Saturday that he supports recognizing the mass starvation as genocide and said the president's bill would come before parliament this week. Some lawmakers from the Prime Minister Viktor Yanukovych's Russia-leaning party of regions, they've got a party of regions, suggested watering it down, but party member Taras Chornovil predicted the president's version would ultimately pass. Yanukovych joined Yushchenko on Saturday's commemorations. Those who deny the Holodomor hate us, our spirit, our future. Yushchenko told the crowd that gathered on the square after a silent procession in which marchers carried aloft white banners representing every Ukrainian region. Black ribbons were hung from the banners. Black ribbons were also hung on Ukraine's blue and yellow national flag Saturday. The tragedy of such a scale it is hard to ever imagine, said Oksana Yatsuk, 18, as she held a flickering candle, one of 25,000 expected to be laid on 2 Kiev squares to honor the victims, and to think that one man created all this terror, this genocide. Under Stalin, each village was ordered to provide the state with a quota of grain, but the demands typically exceeded crop yields. It's kind of like taxation from government. It always seems to exceed what you can afford. As village after village failed to meet the requirements, they were put on a blacklist. The government seized all food and residents were prohibited from leaving, effectively condemning them to starvation. On behalf of Ukraine, I will insist that the victims of Holodomor be recognized as martyrs of one of the biggest catastrophe in the history of mankind, Yushchenko said. Perhaps instead of having children recite a national prayer to obey a system over which they have no control, they could recite the following in school and learn it by heart, perhaps.